What's up, everyone? Thanks for checking out this video. Today, we're going to be editing this photo here. I'm going to show you how I transformed it into this photo. We're utilizing Lightroom and Photoshop, so if you're new to either of those programs or new to photography, then I think this would be a great video for you to watch so you can apply some of the things that I do into your own images and see what you can come up with. All right, let's get into it. Here we are in Lightroom Classic. Um, this was shot with a single strobe and 8400 Pro camera right. And the idea was that we were gonna cast, the main key light on his face and get some fall off onto his legs here. Um, and we kind of did do that, but it is a bit dark, so we're gonna need to adjust for that here in a moment. But first things first, let's go ahead and apply a lens correction. What this is going to do is get rid of any distortion within your lens, which is very common, especially if you don't have the most expensive and latest and greatest glass. This was shot with a Tamron 28 to 75, which by all means is not bad. It's actually really great. So there was very little adjustment to be made when applying that. Okay, let's go into the basic panel. I want to start working on the white balance. This was shot at 5500, which is balance for daylight. I am going to warm it up just a bit, just to bring out some life in his skin tone. I'm also editing this on a calibrated monitor, so some of these adjustments you may not be able to see depending on what monitor you're choosing to view this on, whether it's your phone or a laptop. Every monitor is going to be different, but just so you know, although these changes might seem subtle or look subtle to you, on my monitor, I can actually see those adjustments being applied. First things first, as far as the actual editing of what we're going to do down here, I want to boost the shadows and see what information we have. So when we slide this, everything that's in shadow, if you take a look at his left leg, is going to be affected by the shadow slider. So if we bring this up, we're going to bring some of those details that were lost here in the leg back. We're also going to need to bring the exposure up because the shadow slider alone wasn't enough to bring up as much detail as I wanted. And this seems to be good. I can see his pant leg, his feet. There's also a lot of other details that we'll have to take care of later, and I'll do that in Photoshop. But as far as the overall exposure of him, I'm pretty happy with this. The highlights here are only affecting the highlights. So if you take a look at the top right of his face, as we slide it to the right and boost the highlights, we're going to start clipping our highlights and it just looks like a big old white mess there. So instead, what I actually want to do is bring those highlights down and see if we can recover some skin tone and some skin texture by bringing this down. Then it's all about finding the right balance for your taste and for the image. For me, I think this is a good balance at -48. I think we got rid of that bright spot on his face, but we also, can see a lot more detail in his skin texture. So for me, as of right now, -48 is going to work. The blacks I'm going to bring down just a bit. This is my personal taste. I like my blacks to be pretty deep. And even though the image was already very dark and they're already very deep, some of the adjustments that I know I'm going to make here in a few might mess with that. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring it down by 5. As of right now, the contrast slider, same thing. I'm going to bring it up to 10. Because I already know with some adjustments that we're going to make, we may lose some contrast. So just by default, I usually add contrast to my images. The clarity slider, I'm just going to give a boost of +5. Vibrance, I'm also going to give a boost of +5. Really, the vibrance is only adjusting his sweater, or whatever you want to call this, his Hugh Hefner coat here. Let's move on from that. Let's go into the HSL panel. So the HSL panel is all your various colors of red, orange, yellow, green, aqua, blue, purple, magenta. And if any of these colors were actually in the image, you would be able to identify each of them and either boost the saturation, lower the saturation, or luminance, boost the luminance or decrease the luminance like this. For this image, I'm going to actually decrease the luminance of his shirt, just because if it's too bright, then I think it's gonna draw the eyes too much to the shirt when I want the eyes to be drawn to his face, and his eyes. I will add a little saturation to his skin just with a +5. There's no other colors really in this image that I want to mess with. So for now, those are the only two sliders that we're going to be working with. Okay. And let's go into the color grading. So this in itself could be an entire tutorial. So I'm not going to break things down a lot in this video, but I will touch up on, each thing that I edit. All right. So let's start with the shadows. This button here takes you to the shadows. And I want to add blue to my shadows. So as the name suggests, this is only being applied to the shadows. If we go to the green, that green is being applied again only to the shadows here in the legs, here in the back, the shadow on his chest, and yeah, all the shadows in the image. I am going to keep it a nice blue here. I'm going to bump the saturation up to 34. This is just what I think looks good. And I'm going to trust myself on it, and we're going to stick with it. There isn't a quote unquote right way. If it looks good to you, then go for it. This is just like painting on a canvas. You're going to choose the colors you want to pick, and if it looks good to you, then it's your art. Then it should work. But generally speaking, if you have cool tones in the shadows, you might want to warm the highlights up to give a good balance. So let's bring the saturation up to around 32. The hue at 41 actually is perfect. Same thing with the highlights here. I'm going to go to a hue of 40 and saturation of 32. If I could get there. 31's fine, whatever. Okay. And let's kind of see where this photo is so far. All right, so we've already made a pretty significant transformation of this image. Here's the before on the left. Here is the right where we currently stand, but there are some other adjustments that I creatively want to make, like the boxes here. I would love to bring the exposure down on them. So the way I'm going to do that is by grabbing a graduated filter, and we're going to click and drag it down on your image. Bring it all the way down. Let me click circle so we don't see the filter. Let's go down to range mask and click color. We're going to take this eyedropper, click it on the box. Now let's go back and view our range mask. Okay, and you can see that it actually grabbed his skin tone as well. So I'm going to go up to brush, erase, and we're going to erase it off of his skin or everywhere that we don't want that mask to be applied, which I don't want to apply it to his skin. Okay, I don't want it to be applied to his pants, to his shirt, because remember, I want to decrease the exposure on the boxes, not his pants or his shoes here. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, now I'm going to go up to the exposure slider here, and let's start sliding this down. Let's turn the mask off so we can see what we're doing and how it's affecting the image. Sliding the exposure down until a point where I'm happy, and I'm pretty happy with this. -50 exposure on the boxes themselves. Okay, let's see, what else do I want to do? I think for now this is pretty good. Let's go ahead and take this into Photoshop and we'll finish up. So you're going to right click on the image you're working on, edit in Photoshop, and just wait for Photoshop to open. All right, after you waited a million years to open Photoshop, here's the final image here. Okay, so we're gonna Control J, which is gonna duplicate this layer here. And on top of that layer, I'm gonna add another layer by clicking the Add New Layer button here down at the bottom. And we're gonna label this Healing. Okay, we're gonna come up to our healing brush, this little Band-Aid, Spot Healing Brush. Make our brush size larger by clicking the bracket button. And we can kind of see on the background there are these tiny pieces of tape, and that's from where we taped two pieces of the backdrop together. So I want to make sure that we can't see that in the final edit. And I'm using the healing brush to get rid of those little pieces of tape. Just like that. Just click and drag on those little tiny pieces. Okay. Anything you don't want to be in the image, Photoshop tends to do a pretty good job if you just use the healing brush. Let's go fit screen. Let's look. Okay, there's a huge seam here that we got to get rid of. Let's just go down. This is all with the healing brush, just allowing Photoshop's artificial intelligence to figure out how to get rid of these things. Okay. See, and it generally does a pretty good job, but sometimes you have to go back in and clean it up a little better. All right, so there's still a lot more that we can clean up. Dust on his socks, on the floor, on his pants, a lot on the shoulder here, especially on the shoulder. But we can still kind of see where the two backdrops meet here and create a line. So we're going to go to the healing brush. We're going to click on the healing brush and hold, and that'll bring up the healing brush tool. So what this is going to do is allow us to sample from a specific area in the image. In this case, I'm going to sample from the right-hand side of this line, and we're going to blend that line a little better. So the way we do that is by holding Alt and then right-click. And now we have that little sample we just took, and we can blend it in with the line. Okay, same thing down here. Alt, click. Let's blend this line a little better. Okay, there's a little line here. Let's Alt, let's sample this dark area. Click. Good, just like that. I'm just trying to get rid of the abrupt changes. Okay, so the other thing we gotta heal is his shoulder. And just as before, we're just gonna use the spot healing brush and just click around. And as you can see, Photoshop does an awesome job at cleaning it up without you having to spend too much time on it. All right, that's pretty much done. You can go as in-depth as you want, but for this video, I don't want to go too far and take up too much time doing this. You get the general idea. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is he's holding a pipe. And so the creative in me wants to see some smoke coming out of that pipe. So all I did was I looked up a PNG of smoke, and I found this PNG here, which I'm going to apply in the image. Okay, so we're going to bring this down to a scale that would be appropriate for the pipe. Probably like that. Okay, bring it up. Find a good position for it. I think that looks pretty good. Okay. But if we zoom in here, we can see that it's not perfect. So what I'm going to do is make sure that we're on our smoke layer, which we are here on the bottom right. We're going to create a mask with this button here. Okay. We're going to make sure that the mask is selected. Control I is going to invert that mask. We're going to go to our brush, bring the flow up to 100 if it isn't. And we're going to mask that smoke right back in. But we're going to be careful not to get the smoke that was underneath the pipe. So that smoke there is what I'm trying to avoid. All right, I'll just go back and erase it with the black paint. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, if we were to view this from afar, the smoke looks, to me, it looks just a little too fake when it's that opaque. So I want to adjust the opacity, and I'm going to bring it down to 15%. And to me, that looks a little more realistic of what the smoke would actually look like coming out from a pipe like that from this perspective. Okay. So the other thing I want to do is create an atmospheric smoke. Almost give a sense that he had been sitting there for a few minutes and smoke was starting to just accumulate around him. So we're going to use a brush that you can get for free on brusheasy.com. By the way, if anyone tries to sell you a brush pack, it's a total scam. You can get every single brush for free. You'll just have to search for it on Google, but the resources are there. Don't ever buy brush packs. It's a scam. And a scam that I fell into when I first started. So don't feel guilty if you've purchased brushes. All right, so let's go ahead and create another layer. We're going to go to our brush, and I already have these brushes installed. So I'm not going to go over how to install brushes, but if you happen to have some brushes installed already, then you can kind of follow along with what I'm doing. All right, so the free fog Photoshop brushes that I got from brusheasy.com. I know that we're going to select number 66. Looks like that. Make this as big as we can and apply it like so. Let me backtrack because our paint was on red from an earlier project I was working on. Let's bring it back to white. Click on the image just like that. And similar to like what we did with this smoke for the pipe, I'm going to bring the opacity down significantly to a 9. That looks good. We're just creating a sense of atmosphere. We're not going to make it look like he's hotboxing, but we're making it look like there's an atmosphere of smoke around him, which there would be if someone was smoking. So that covers the top, but we need something for the bottom. And this particular brush, if you just see I applied it, it also applies a very harsh line there near his knee. So I'm actually going to use a different brush. Let's go back up to our brushes. It's in a totally different pack. It is, let's see if I could find it. Nope. Nope. I mean, sometimes you just got to kind of play around with the brushes you have and until you find one that is going to work. Nope. This is the one I was looking for. There we go. We're going to want to put that on a new layer. Boom, just like that. Change the opacity. I'm bringing it down all the way to 1%. Almost negligible, but it does make a difference in the overall image. There we go, 1%. Tiny little detail. Okay, the next thing I want to do is a little dodge and burn. So we're going to click this button here and bring up a curves layer. All right, we're gonna click and bring this up to about there, just because that tends to work. Let's go back to our brush. We're gonna go and select a soft brush. Okay, bring the flow down to about 3% to allow this to build. And what we're gonna do is, you can already see that it is being applied to the entire image. So we're gonna wanna Control I while the curves is selected, and we're gonna paint that brightness on select areas. All right, so I'm gonna use my XP pen, which is similar to a Wacom, but far cheaper, and it works. It's like 40 bucks. I would highly suggest using it. It makes using the brush a lot more intuitive and so much more easier to control. All right, so I want to actually get the little highlights on this metal portion here. I just think that's a nice subtle detail to bring out. So we're gonna brush. You know what? We first got to be on white paint for this to work. All right, so now it's doing something. We're brushing that curves adjustment onto the highlights here and brightening those spots. You see that subtle change? Okay, good. So I wanted to get the tiny little highlights here in his shoes, just to add a little interest to the image. We could go in and add a little brightness to his eyes. Okay. Just a little. I want to see if we can get a little color out of them. Just like that. Get a little bit of the whites. Okay. That's probably pretty good for any dodging, which dodging just means brightening. Okay, so now we're gonna burn. Burning means darkening. We're gonna do another curves layer, except instead of sliding it up, we're gonna slide it down to about here. Hide that. Again, Control I on the mask and go back to your brush. We're gonna brush in this curves adjustment, which is gonna darken parts of the area that we use this brush. For me, I want the floor to be a little darker. So we're gonna burn the floor here. In doing this, I also wanna lead from bottom left, right up to our subject. So I'm gonna do that by subtly burning the bottom half of this image, AKA making it a little darker. Just like this. I'm gonna bring the flow up just a bit on this so we can start seeing the changes a little faster. Okay. Okay, because I'm using my pen is pressure sensitive. So let me backtrack. That looked a little messy. So I could lightly apply pressure on my pen, and that's going to dictate how much of a flow is being applied when I use my pen. So I could go harder here in the corner, and it'll apply a little more heavily. And I could go a little lighter and more subtle here. Okay, we're also building some contrast when we do this in the image. We're shaping. this should be a little darker. Since the light source is coming from camera right, top right, this should probably be a little darker. Okay. All right, let's kind of take a look at what we've done so far. And there you go. So just like that. A little sloppy here on the background. This isn't the official image that I'm delivering to the client. This is more an illustration of how I, did it in the first place. So it's not going to be perfect this time around. I'm not intending it to be perfect. I'm intending to just kind of show you how I made those adjustments. So I'm not even gonna bother correcting that. I'm gonna go back to my what would be dodge. You should definitely label them. And I want to actually dodge his pants just a little bit. Bring them out just a little bit. Just this highlight. I think that looks pretty cool. Like that. And that's pretty much it. Yeah. That's it. That's the final image. So I hope you got something out of this video. Bear in mind, this was my first YouTube video, so I may not have gone so in depth as I could have, but I'll progressively get better at doing these things and, remember along the way that you guys want to learn some things. So if I didn't do that great of a job today, I'll do better next time. If it did help you, or if it was interesting for you, then consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel. I'm going to try to post a new image at least every week, and tutorials as well, breaking down each specific thing I did a lot more in depth for you guys. But all right, that is it. See you guys later.